Good morning from Philadelphia. Today's three topics. We're going to get another update on how people are viewing the situation in Iran. We're going to take a look at trans issues and the Trump base. And with all three, we'll touch on their implications for the midterm elections. Starting with Iran, the big news is nothing has changed. 40% of voters approve of the attack. Same as it was on the very first Saturday that we polled about it. Most voters are still opposed. When we look a little bit deeper, no matter how you look at the numbers, no matter how you think about what people are seeing, the president is out there saying he's negotiating. There might be a pause. Maybe something will happen. But voters have adopted the view that this is going to last a long time. Only 12% of American voters believe that the fighting will stop within the next few weeks. Another 19% say it's somewhat likely it could happen. And 57%, solid majority, say it's unlikely the fighting is going to be ending soon. Now, I've talked a lot about the downside risks for President Trump and his administration with the situation in Iran, but there is a little nugget that suggests there are possible areas of upside potential. And with that, we start with the traditional Republicans, the people who are voted for Donald Trump because he wasn't Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, but they're not really part of the Trump base. This is the most significant group to reach out to in the midterm elections. And they are very skeptical of the president's ability to bring about change. The MAGA base, the Trump base, very supportive. They trust him. They think he'll bring about regime change. Only 14% of these traditional Republicans think the president will be successful. However, if we give them a choice, should we keep fighting until regime change happens, or should we stop the fighting as soon as possible? 60% of them say we should keep on fighting and bring about regime change. How does that turn into some upside for the president? If he is able to have these negotiations, if he gets to a place where there's some new leadership that is able to not only make a deal with him, but establish some level of control, these Republicans will be pleased with the outcome. And to be honest, they'll be shocked. So that has some upside potential for the president. Now, second topic, trans issues. I've said it, and I'll say it every time we talk about the midterm elections. It's the economy, stupid. James Carville had it right all those years ago. But the economy sets a baseline. If the fighting ends fairly soon, if gas prices begin the process, it'll take months, but if it begins the process of lowering gas prices at the pump, we're likely to see the economy improve to where the GOP might be competitive. And at that point, the Democrats are burdened by what I call the 20%er issue, or the 20%ers, the activists who support these issues. A great example of this is the very small segment of Americans who favor open borders. That's why border security is such a good issue for the GOP. And we see the same thing on trans issues. Fewer than 20% of voters believe that biological males should be allowed to compete in women's sports. Fewer than 20% believe that biological males who identify as women should be allowed in a woman's locker room. In fact, fewer than 20% believe that biological males who were awarded trophies or medals for winning women's events should be allowed to keep them. 72% say no, they should be stripped of their titles and the awards given to the appropriate women. This is a problem for the Democratic Party because of where their base is. A great example of this comes on the question of what happens if somebody, a biological male, commits a crime, is arrested and sentenced to prison, but identifies as a woman. Hardly anybody, only 16% of voters, believe that person should be sent to a woman's prison. But among the Democratic Party, fewer than half are willing to say that person should be sent to a men's prison. The progressive base, very strong in this area. 25% of Democrats say that person should be sent to a woman's prison, and 29% say they're not sure. What this means, again, in the midterm context, if we get to a place where the economy makes it competitive, issues like these will be very helpful to the GOP and could lead to some electoral surprises. Finally, the Trump base. It's one of these terms that people talk about all the time. Some experts were shocked that the Trump base didn't fracture over the war in Iran. There is no precise term. You don't have a membership card to become MAGA. So I wanted to just talk about the way we define the Trump base and what its implications are, what we've been seeing in trends. Since October of 2020, we have asked what we call a four-way choice question countless times. The four-way choice is basically, other things being equal, would you prefer somebody who likes Trump-like policies, traditional Republican policies, traditional Democrat policies, or AOC-like policies? Early in the process, when we started asking this question, we used Bernie Sanders instead of AOC. Back in October of 2020, 48% of voters picked one of the two Republican coalition positions, either the Trump base or the traditional R's. In 2024, in November, just after Donald Trump won his victory, that number inched up to 52%. Right now, it's back down to 49%. The size of the coalitions isn't really shifting all that much, but the makeup within is pretty significant. And by the way, on the Democratic side, the two wings, the AOC wing and the traditionals, are pretty even. That's why they keep butting heads. But on the Republican side, the number of people identifying, the number of all voters identifying as liking Trump policies has ranged from a low of 28% back in the summer of 22 to a high of 38% in November and December and January after he won his election. From the moment he took office, the number of people saying they prefer Trump-like policies has been drifting down. It's at 31% now. So in the midterm elections, when you begin to think about these dynamics, the Trump base is going to turn out. They are fired up. They are excited. They are as excited as Democrats. They will crawl across broken glass to go to the polls. What Republicans need to have a better midterm is to get these traditional Republican voters to show up. And that's something that a lot of the base doesn't want to acknowledge. There's a lot of people giving advice saying, you need to throw red meat to the base. You need to fire up the base. No, for the Republicans to have a successful midterm, they need these more traditional GOP voters to think it's worth their while to show up and vote.